May 1st, 1943, 0400 hours. The Steinplatz, Berlin. Admiral Karl Dönitz stood before a wall-sized map of the Atlantic Ocean, watching colored pins crawl across gray canvas like insects on flesh. Each red pin represented a U-boat, each blue pin an Allied convoy. The room, buried 3 stories beneath the Reich Naval Command, smelled of cigarette smoke, stale coffee, and the peculiar mustiness of recycled air pushed through underground ventilation shafts. Dönitz was 51 years old, lean and angular, with the weathered face of a man who'd spent decades breathing salt spray. His eyes, pale blue and perpetually calculating, tracked the pins with an intensity that made junior officers uncomfortable. He hadn't slept properly in 72 hours. Dark crescents shadowed his eyes. His uniform jacket hung open, uncharacteristic for a man known for Prussian discipline. But as he studied the map, something resembling satisfaction flickered across his features. 425 operational U-boats. Never in the history of naval warfare had Germany fielded such a submarine force. More boats than 1930, 1940, 1941, 1942 combined at their peaks. The construction yards at Kiel, Hamburg, Bremen, and Danzig were performing miracles, launching nearly 30 boats monthly. The wolf packs prowling the Atlantic numbered in the dozens. Convoys were being savaged. Merchant tonnage was bleeding into the depths. Dönitz allowed himself a thin smile. The British called the Atlantic their lifeline. He intended to sever it. Behind him, Kapitän-Leutnant Günther Hessler, his son-in-law and operational analyst, cleared his throat softly. Herr Admiral, the overnight casualty report. Dönitz turned. Hessler's expression stopped the smile cold. How many? 7 boats, sir. No contact for 48 hours. Presumed lost. 7 in a single night. Dönitz moved to his desk where neat columns of numbers covered a leather-bound ledger. His handwriting was meticulous, each digit formed with architectural precision. He opened the current month's page and added 7 hash marks to the loss column. The mathematics stared back at him. April losses, 43 boats. March, 36. February, 19. An upward curve. A trajectory. A pattern his mathematician's mind couldn't ignore. He closed the ledger and returned to the map. Somewhere in the North Atlantic, U-528 was hunting convoy HX-237. Commander Harold Gelhaus had reported 3 merchant kills yesterday. A success. The kind of success that had defined the happy time of 1940. But Dönitz found himself counting differently now. Not ships sunk, but boats that didn't return. U-528 would report again at 0600 hours, if it is reported at all. Outside, Berlin stirred toward dawn. Somewhere above the bunker, birds were singing, oblivious to the mathematics of industrial death being calculated in the depths below. Dönitz lit another cigarette, the match flare briefly illuminating his face in the map room's shadows. He was Germany's foremost submarine commander, architect of the Wolfpack tactics that had nearly strangled Britain in 1940. He understood U-boat warfare better than any man alive. What he didn't yet understand, what the numbers were trying to tell him in their cold, merciless language, was that in 30 days, his entire strategy would collapse. Not because of tactics, not because of courage, not because of technology, because of arithmetic. The equation was simple. Boats lost versus boats built. And somewhere in the spring of 1943, in the cold mathematics of industrial warfare, that equation had begun to invert. May 1st marked the beginning. 31 days later, when the month closed its blood-soaked ledger, 99 U-boats would be gone. 99 crews, nearly 7,000 men, would have drowned, suffocated, or been crushed in steel tombs beneath the Atlantic. But that morning, standing before his map, with 425 red pins still clustered across the ocean, Dönitz believed victory remained possible. He was wrong. The mathematics had already been decided. The rest was just the slow, mechanical process of addition and subtraction playing out across 3 million square miles of water. And mathematics, unlike men, cannot be persuaded, inspired, or rallied. It simply is. To understand why May 1943 became Black May, why 99 U-boats vanished in 30 days, you must first understand the confidence that preceded it. Dönitz's faith in submarine warfare wasn't delusional optimism. It was rooted in proven success. Between September 1939 and December 1941, U-boats had sunk over 8 million tons of Allied shipping. During the second happy time of early 1942, when America entered the war unprepared for convoy defense, U-boats ravaged the eastern seaboard like wolves among sheep. Commanders reported so many targets they couldn't attack them all. Burning tankers illuminated the Florida coastline nightly. The U-boat itself was a remarkable weapon. The Type 6IC, the workhorse of Dönitz's fleet, displaced 769 tons, stretched 67 meters bow to stern, and carried 14 torpedoes. Its diesel engines could push it to 17 knots on the surface. Submerged, electric motors provided 7 knots for evasion. Operating depth reached 220 meters, deep enough to escape most depth charges. But the U-boat's greatest advantage wasn't technical. It was tactical. Dönitz had pioneered the Rudel tactic, wolfpack tactics. Instead of lone submarines hunting independently, boats would mass around convoys, coordinated by radio from Berlin. When one U-boat spotted a convoy, it would shadow and transmit position reports. Other boats would converge. Then, under cover of darkness, the pack would attack simultaneously from multiple bearings, overwhelming escort defenses. The mathematics favored the wolves. A typical North Atlantic convoy comprised 40 to 60 merchant ships, guarded by perhaps 6 escorts. 6 warships couldn't protect a front spanning 20 miles. Gaps existed. U-boats exploited them. Through 1942, the system worked. Merchant losses exceeded construction. Britain's food stocks dwindled. Fuel reserves dropped. Churchill would later write that the U-boat peril was the only thing that ever frightened me during the war. So when Dönitz surveyed his 425 boats in May 1943, his confidence had an empirical foundation. He commanded more submarines than any admiral in history. His tactics had proven themselves across 4 years of warfare. German industrial production had finally, after years of frustrating delays, reached meaningful scale. 25 to 30 boats launched monthly. If losses remained around 20 boats per month, the average through 1942, the fleet would continue growing. The mathematics projected eventual dominance. But 3 factors had shifted, invisibly and catastrophically. First, the Atlantic gap had closed. For years, a zone existed in the mid-Atlantic beyond the range of land-based aircraft. The Black Pit crews called it. U-boats could surface there without fear of air attack, recharge batteries, and maneuver freely. Convoys crossing this gap, roughly 900 miles wide, were vulnerable. By May 1943, that gap no longer existed. American-built B-24 Liberators fitted with extra fuel tanks now reached across the entire ocean. The British had established bases in Iceland and Newfoundland. Radar-equipped Sunderland flying boats prowled constantly. And critically, the Allies had deployed escort carriers, small aircraft carriers converted from merchant hulls, each carrying 20 aircraft that could provide continuous air cover. No Atlantic zone remained safe for surface U-boats. Second, technology had shifted decisively. Allied ships now carried centimetric radar operating at 10 centimeter wavelengths. German Metox radar detectors, which had previously warned U-boats of approaching aircraft, couldn't detect these new frequencies. U-boats were being caught surfaced, unaware, and destroyed before they could dive. High-frequency direction finding, HFDF, pronounced Huff Duff, allowed escorts to pinpoint U-boat radio transmissions instantly. The Wolfpack tactic required boats to report convoy positions. Every transmission now painted a target. The Allies had also perfected the Hedgehog, a forward-throwing mortar that launched 2-4 contact-fused projectiles in an oval pattern ahead of attacking escorts. Unlike depth charges, Hedgehogs only exploded on contact with a submarine's hull. Silent misses didn't warn the U-boat. A single hit meant destruction. And beneath all these tactical innovations lay a secret Dönitz didn't know. Ultra. British cryptographers at Bletchley Park had broken the German Enigma cipher. Not perfectly, not always in real time, but often enough. Allied convoy commanders received decrypted U-boat position reports, orders, and patrol areas. Convoys were routed around wolf packs. Ambushes were set. Hunter-killer groups were vectored onto specific boats with lethal precision. The U-boats weren't hunting. They were being hunted. Third, and most critical, industrial mathematics had inverted. Here's where the story transforms from tactics to arithmetic, from battles to spreadsheets. German U-boat production in May 1943, 25 boats. Allied U-boat destruction rate 30 to 35 boats monthly. That 5 to 10 boat monthly deficit seems small. But mathematics compounds. A fleet losing more assets than it can replace will shrink. Shrinking forces engage fewer enemies, crews gain less experience. Losses concentrate among survivors. The spiral accelerates. Dönitz understood production numbers intimately. His ledgers tracked every keel laid, every boat launched, every crew trained. But what he couldn't see, what no amount of tactical brilliance could overcome, was the Allied production advantage across the entire economic system. While Germany built 25 U-boats monthly, American shipyards were launching merchant ships at a staggering rate. The Kaiser shipyards in Richmond, California, using revolutionary assembly line techniques, could construct a Liberty ship, a 1050 VZ ton cargo vessel, in 42 days. By late 1943, 3 Liberty ships were being completed daily. Do the mathematics. Germany sinks 30 Allied merchant ships monthly. America builds 90. The equation was simple, brutal, and decisive. Every U-boat sunk represented 44 trained submariners dead or captured, men requiring months of specialized training. Every Allied merchant ship sunk was replaced in weeks by mass production yards. And every time a convoy successfully crossed the Atlantic, thousands of tons of food, fuel, tanks, aircraft, and ammunition poured into Britain, building the arsenal that would eventually storm Fortress Europe. Dönitz was fighting industrial mathematics with tactical creativity. It was like fighting gravity with willpower. But on May 1st, standing before his map with 425 red pins, he didn't yet see the equation clearly. The numbers were there in his ledgers, waiting to be compiled, analyzed, and understood. By May 31st, mathematics would speak in a language even the most dedicated believer couldn't deny. The language of empty berths, silent radio frequencies, casualty notifications, and a ledger page showing 99 hash marks in the loss column. May 4th, 1943, 1620 hours, North Atlantic 620 miles southwest of Iceland. Corvette 10 Captain Peter-Erich Cremer stands in the conning tower of U-333, binoculars pressed against his face hard enough to leave red circles on his skin. The submarine rolls gently in moderate swells. Gray sky. Gray sea. The Atlantic stretches featureless in every direction. Cremer is 30 years old, a veteran of 21 patrols. His crew calls him Old Man despite his youth, a term of respect in the claustrophobic hierarchy of submarine warfare. He has sunk 14 Allied ships. He has survived depth charge attacks that ruptured hull seals and flooded compartments. He knows how to hunt. Right now, he's being hunted. Contact bearing 270, range 12 kilometers, reports the hydrophone operator below, his voice thin through the voice tube. Single screw, probable escort. Cremer doesn't respond immediately. One escort means a convoy nearby. Doctrine requires him to shadow, report position, and wait for other Wolfpack members to converge. But something feels wrong. 3 days ago, U-333 surfaced to transmit a weather report. Standard procedure. 30 seconds after the transmission ended, a radar-equipped B-24 Liberator materialized from cloud cover and nearly killed them. Cremer crash-dived with seconds to spare, depth charges detonating shallow as U-333 plummeted towards safety. Since then, every time they surface, aircraft appear, as if they know. As if they're waiting. Prepare to dive, Cremer orders. Secure the bridge. The lookouts scramble below. Cremer takes one last scan of the horizon and freezes. There, 3 kilometers to port, a dark smudge against the sky. Aircraft. Alarm! He screams into the voice tube, already dropping through the hatch. Dive! 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 The klaxon shrieks. Men move with the choreographed efficiency of training and terror. Vents open. Water floods ballast tanks. The bow tilts downward. U-333 is at 15 meters when the first depth charges detonate. The explosion lifts the submarine like a toy, slamming Cremer against the periscope housing. Lights shatter. Glass rains down. A high-pitched shriek of tortured metal fills the pressure hull. Take her to 100 meters. Cremer shouts over the chaos. Silent running! The submarine descends into darkness. Crew members move on felt-soled boots, breathing shallowly, touching nothing unnecessary. Any sound, a dropped wrench, a cough, an electrical motor, becomes a beacon for the hunters above. Through the hull comes the sound of ships' propellers. Multiple ships now. circling, pinging with active sonar. Ping, ping, ping. Each sonar pulse hammers through you. 333s haul like a fist. The escorts know they're here. They're bracketing the area, waiting for the submarine to move, to make noise, to reveal its position. Cremer stands motionless in the control room, watching depth gauges, listening to sounds conducted through water and steel. Condensation drips from pipes. The air grows thick with carbon dioxide as scrubbers struggle to cleanse the atmosphere. 1 hour passes. 2. 3. The escorts don't leave. They circle, patient as sharks, waiting for the submarine's batteries to drain, for the air to become unbreathable, for biological necessity to force you 333 to surface. At 23:40 hours, after 7 hours submerged, Cremer makes his decision. Surface. All diesels full ahead. We run. It's a calculated gamble. At night, on the surface, you, 333, can outrun most escorts. Its 17-knot surface speed exceeds the 15 knots of many corvettes. If they can gain separation, submerge again, they might escape. The submarine breaches like a whale, water cascading from its conning tower. Diesels roar to life. Cremer scrambles topside, scanning desperately for searchlights blind him. The escorts were waiting. They'd predicted the tactic. Now, illuminated like an actor on stage, U-333 is naked before its executioners. Gunfire erupts. Tracers streak across the water. A corvette charges. Bow wave whiten the searchlight glare. Dive! Crash dive! Cremer drops through the hatch, dogging it behind him as the first shells strike you. 333's deck. They descend again, but this time, the escorts have precise positioning. The depth charges bracket them perfectly. The fourth explosion ruptures the aft battery compartment. Chlorine gas, produced when seawater mixes with battery acid, begins filling the submarine. Men cough, eyes streaming, lungs burning. Surface, Cremer says quietly. Prepare to abandon ship. U-333 wallows to the surface a final time. The crew spills onto the deck, hands raised. A British corvette approaches cautiously, deck gun trained on the surrendering Germans. 44 men survive. Cremer sets scuttling charges and watches his boat, his home for 21 patrols, slip beneath the Atlantic. He is lucky. Most commanders don't survive to surrender. This scene, repeated 90 times in May 1943, tells only the tactical story. The strategic story is mathematical. May 11, 1943. Admiral Dönitz reviews the weekly casualty report at his Berlin headquarters. 15 boats in 7 days. U-89, U-186, U-528, U-456, U-638, U-176, U-753, U-201, U-403, U-528, U-174, U-266, U-273, U-381, U-209. Each entry in the ledger represents not just a submarine, but a narrative, a crew, a commander. Training that cost months and resources Germany couldn't spare. Steel allocated from finite reserves. Torpedoes manufactured in factories being bombed nightly by Allied air forces. Dönitz calls an emergency conference. His staff assembles around the map table, faces drawn. 15 boats, Dönitz says without preamble, in 1 week. Gentlemen, explain this. Silence. Then Konter-Admiral Eberhard Gott, Chief of Operations, speaks carefully. The escorts are more aggressive. The aircraft are more numerous. They've closed the Atlantic gap. I know what they've done, Dönitz snaps. What are we doing wrong? Another silence. Because the answer, unspoken but understood by everyone in that room, is nothing wrong tactically. The tactics that worked for 3 years are now insufficient against an enemy whose advantages have compounded beyond countermeasure. Kapitänleutnant Hessler opens a folder. Herr Admiral, production analysis. Current construction rate, 20 to 5 boats monthly. Current loss rate, he pauses. If May continues at present trajectory, 40 to 50 boats. The number hangs in the air like smoke. 40 to 50 boats lost versus 25 built. A net monthly loss of 25 boats. At that rate, the entire operational fleet, 425 boats, would vanish in 17 months. Unacceptable, Dönitz says. But even as he speaks, he knows the word is meaningless. Arithmetic doesn't negotiate. Withdraw? God suggests carefully. Withdraw where? Dönitz's voice rises. The Atlantic is the front. If we abandon it, Britain survives. If Britain survives, there will be an invasion. We must continue operations. He's right strategically. But mathematics cares nothing for strategy. May 18, 1943. The slaughter continues. U-954 attacked by a Sunderland flying boat. Depth charged. All hands lost. U-273 caught surface by escorts from convoy HX-239. Sunk with her entire crew. U-657 surprised by aircraft. Depth charged before diving. Imploded at 60 meters. Each sinking follows a pattern. U-boats surfaced to transit or attack are caught by radar-equipped aircraft. U-boats submerged are pinpointed by HF-DF radio tracking and destroyed by swarms of escorts. The submarine's traditional advantages, stealth, surprise, the vastness of the ocean, have evaporated against technology and numerical superiority. Commander Harold Gelhaus, captain of U-528, transmits a message that would haunt Dönitz. For every convoy located, we are found twice. For every attack we launch, we suffer 3. The Atlantic has become a killing ground. Not for them, for us. The message was U-528's last transmission. She vanished with all hands on May 12th. May 24th, 1943. The breaking point. Dönitz summons his senior staff. The morning casualty report lists 6 more boats. The month's total now stands at 41. Confirmed losses with another dozen overdue and presumed lost. 41 U-boats, 1,800 men, gone. More critically, the kill-to-loss ratio has collapsed. In January 1943, U-boats sank 4 Allied ships for every boat lost. In February, 3-1. In March, 2-1. In May, the ratio was inverted. 1 merchant ship sunk for every 2 U-boats lost. Mathematics is unsustainable. Dönitz stands before his map. The red pins, once clustered in aggressive patrol lines, now seem sparse, depleted. He thinks of the crews still out there, still hunting, still believing their courage and skill matter against an enemy whose advantages are industrial, systemic, and insurmountable. He lifts the telephone to Berlin Naval Headquarters. All U-boats operating in the North Atlantic are to withdraw immediately to defensive positions south of the Azores. The order is a euphemism. Defensive positions means retreat. It means the primary operational zone, the convoy routes between America and Britain, is being abandoned. It means acknowledging defeat. The staff officers stand frozen. In 4 years of war, Dönitz has never withdrawn. His philosophy has always been aggressive persistence, attrition, victory through accumulated losses inflicted on the enemy. But the numbers have spoken. And Dönitz, for all his fanaticism, is fundamentally a mathematician. Type the order, he says quietly. Encode and transmit immediately. At 1800 hours on May 24th, U-boats across the Atlantic received the withdrawal command. Some commanders weep, others rage. A few consider ignoring the order, continuing their patrols out of sheer defiance, but they obey. Because they too have seen the casualty lists. They too have watched friends vanish. They too understand that courage without mathematics is merely slower death. By May 31st, when the blood-soaked month finally closes, the tally stands at 99 U-boats destroyed. Of those, 43 were sunk in the Atlantic, the rest in the Mediterranean, Arctic, and Caribbean. Nearly 7,000 men died. The average U-boat patrol survival rate dropped to 1.5 missions, meaning a newly deployed crew had less than 50% chance of surviving 2 patrols. Black May didn't just destroy submarines. It destroyed faith in the weapon itself. The Battle of the Atlantic wasn't over. U-boats would continue operations for 2 more years, evolving tactics, deploying snorkels for underwater breathing, and introducing acoustic torpedoes. Individual boats would still score victories, but the strategic equation had inverted irreversibly. From May 1943 forward, Germany couldn't build U-boats faster than the Allies could sink them. And an industrial equation tilted against you doesn't improve through courage. It compounds through arithmetic until defeat becomes mathematical certainty. But Black May wasn't decided in the North Atlantic. It was decided in shipyards and factories thousands of miles from any battlefield, places where welders, riveters, and assembly line workers waged industrial warfare with precision and scale that no amount of tactical brilliance could overcome. Consider the arithmetic from a different angle. Between May 1st and May 31st, 1943, Germany lost 99 U-boats. That represents 4,356 trained submariners, men who required months of specialized instruction in engineering, navigation, torpedo mechanics, and the unique physics of underwater warfare. Each represented an investment Germany's strained training infrastructure couldn't efficiently replace. During the same period, Allied shipyards launched 156 new merchant vessels, totaling over 1 million gross registered tons. The Kaiser shipyards alone delivered 41 Liberty ships. Each vessel replaced losses from not just May but previous months, building surplus capacity that would eventually flood Europe with invasion supplies. The mathematics get worse for Germany. A Type 6IC U-boat required 300,000 man-hours to construct, roughly 9 months from keel laying to commissioning. Critical materials included specialized steel alloys, electric motors, complex torpedo guidance systems, and precision depth gauges. These components competed for resources with tank production, aircraft manufacturing, and Wehrmacht equipment needs. A Liberty ship required 244,000 man-hours, but Kaiser's assembly line innovations drove this down to 150,000 hours. More importantly, Liberty ships used prefabricated sections welded together, not riveted. Sections were built simultaneously in different yards and assembled rapidly. The entire process treated shipbuilding like automobile manufacturing: standardized, modular, scalable. Germany was crafting, America was manufacturing. But the industrial gap extended beyond simple production numbers. It encompassed systemic advantages that compounded at every level. Germany's steel production in 1943, 30 million tons annually, under constant Allied bombing. America's steel production, 80 million tons, utterly safe from Axis attack. Every U-boat hull consumed steel that couldn't become a panzer, a rail car, or a bridge. Priorities competed brutally. Albert Speer, Minister of Armaments, faced impossible triage decisions. Build more U-boats or more fighters to defend the homeland? More torpedoes or more anti-tank guns for the Eastern Front? America faced no such dilemmas. Its industrial capacity was so vast that it simultaneously supplied its own forces, equipped Britain and Soviet Russia through Lend-Lease, and maintained civilian production. Detroit built tanks and automobiles concurrently. While German civilians endured rationing from 1939 onward, Americans experienced relative abundance throughout the war. When you're afraid of common central fibers. In 73, 2 months repeated with the coffee, drifted with that cry down. In 76, 27 2 months Praker rabies, 27 trained submarine school, 2 months operational workup on a training boat, 6 months basic training, 3 months basic training, 2 months operational workup on a training boat. In 76, 4 qualified watch officers. Under 8% of multi-conjuncts, 73 seconds repeated, 1 crew. A submarine school for 1 person, and resources remained available, which they increasingly didn't. Compare this to Allied merchant crews. A basic merchant mariner course took 12 weeks. Losses were terrible. 9,500 Allied merchant sailors died in 1943, but the training pipeline replenished crews faster than ships could be built. Here's where the asymmetry becomes staggering. The Allies deployed 15 new technologies or tactical innovations between January and June 1943. Centimetric radar, invisible to German detectors, B-24 Liberators with very long-range modifications, escort carriers, CVEs providing continuous air cover, Lee lights, powerful searchlights for night attacks, HAV/DF cross-bearing networks, improved depth charges with faster sink rates, Hedgehog forward-throwing mortars, acoustic torpedoes for Allied use, magnetic anomaly detectors, MAD gear, improved sonobuoys, expanded ultra-decryption capacity, tactical coordination between air and sea forces, camships, ships with catapult fighters, snowflake illumination rockets, 15 innovations in 6 months. Germany's counter-innovations in the same period, Matox radar detectors, already obsolete against centimetric radar, enhanced flak armament on U-boats, encouraging them to fight aircraft. A losing proposition, the technological development rates weren't comparable. They were asymmetric to the point of farce. Why? Because Allied research and development occurred in countries whose industrial infrastructure was intact, growing, and safe. The MIT Radiation Laboratory developed centimetric radar in Massachusetts, untroubled by bombers. British operational research teams analyzed convoy tactics in comfortable Cambridge offices. American shipyards tested new welding techniques on the Oakland waterfront while swing bands played for workers. German engineers worked in facilities under constant air attack, with chronic material shortages, competing bureaucratic demands, and the knowledge that any revolutionary innovation would take months to deploy, if resources could be found at all. But the deepest advantage wasn't technological or numerical. It was philosophical. The Allied war economy was a system designed to absorb, adapt, and overwhelm. Losses were expected, planned for, and exceeded by production margins. When U-boats sank 30 merchant ships in May 1943, it was tragic. 900 merchant sailors died, but strategically irrelevant. Those 30 ships represented 3% of the 1,000-plus vessels crossing the Atlantic that month. The other 970 delivered their cargo. Britain was fed. The invasion buildup continued. The German war economy was a system designed for short, decisive campaigns. Blitzkrieg. Overwhelming initial superiority followed by rapid victory before resources depleted. It worked brilliantly in Poland, France, and initially in Russia. But when war became attritional, when victory depended on industrial staying power, the system couldn't adapt. There was no margin, no depth, no capacity to absorb losses and simultaneously increase production. By May 1943, Germany was fighting on 3 fronts: North Africa, collapsing; Russia, catastrophic after Stalingrad; and the Atlantic, now losing. Every front demanded resources. Every front competed brutally. The Allies, by contrast, were ramping up. D-Day was still 13 months away, but the industrial machinery supporting it was already hitting stride. Liberty ships, Sherman tanks, P-51 fighters. Landing craft, the Avalanche, was building. Most devastating of all was what Black May did to U-boat crew morale. Read the diary of Herbert Werner, commander of U-230, writing in late May 1943, "We are no longer hunters. We are the hunted. Every time we surface, death waits. Every transmission brings aircraft. The Atlantic has become a graveyard decorated with iron coffins. We are ghosts piloting tombs, waiting for mathematics to claim us." Contrast this with Allied merchant crews. Yes, they knew the dangers. Yes, the fear was real. But they also saw the evidence of winning. More escorts every month. More air cover. Fewer attacks. Shorter voyages as ports received more supplies. And most critically, they saw friends survive while hearing of U-boats sunk. Hope versus despair. It's difficult to quantify, impossible to put in a ledger, but absolutely decisive in sustained conflict. By June 1943, veteran U-boat crews, those who'd survived multiple patrols, were called lords by junior sailors, because survival to veteran status had become nearly miraculous. The average U-boat sailor had better odds playing Russian roulette. When young men know they're mathematically doomed, courage becomes brittle. Training becomes desperate. Mistakes compound. Here's the number that decided the Battle of the Atlantic. To sustain operations, Germany needed to sink Allied merchant tonnage faster than it could be replaced. The break-even point was roughly 700,000 tons sunk per month, the rate at which Allied construction could be exceeded. In November 1942, U-boats achieved this, sinking 729,000 tons. In May 1943, they sank 264,000 tons, less than half the break-even point, while losing 99 boats. The ratio had inverted catastrophically. Dönitz recognized this. He was many things: a dedicated Nazi, a ruthless strategist, a fanatic believer in submarine warfare. But he wasn't stupid. He could read ledgers. On May 24th, when he ordered the Atlantic withdrawal, he wrote in his diary, "We are facing an enemy whose industrial capacity renders tactical considerations secondary. For every boat we deploy, they deploy 3 countermeasures. For every ship we sink, they build 4. Mathematics is turned against us, and mathematics cannot be defeated by courage." It was the most honest assessment any German commander made during the war. Black May wasn't a battle, it was an audit where the spreadsheet showed one side producing, adapting, and overwhelming at rates the other couldn't match, where industrial capacity, Unglamorous, distant from front lines, built by workers in coveralls rather than soldiers in uniforms, decided the outcome more certainly than any torpedo or depth charge. The submarine wasn't defeated by technology, though technology helped. It wasn't defeated by tactics, though tactics evolved. It was defeated by an economic system that could absorb losses, multiply counters, and grind forward with the relentless patience of compound interest. In modern warfare, the factory floor is the battlefield. The assembly line is the front line, and the most important soldier isn't the one carrying a rifle. It's the one carrying a welding torch. Admiral Karl Dönitz survived Black May. He survived the war. In the bizarre final days of the Third Reich, as Hitler committed suicide in his Berlin bunker, the Führer designated Dönitz his successor. For 23 surreal days, May 1 to May 23, 1945, Dönitz served as President of Germany, overseeing the unconditional surrender. At the Nuremberg trials, he was convicted of war crimes and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. He served the full sentence at Spandau prison, refusing early release. Upon his freedom in 1956, he returned to a small village in northern Germany where he lived quietly until his death in 1980 at age 89. He never recanted his loyalty to Hitler, but in his memoirs published in 1959, he devoted an entire chapter to May 1943. The title was stark: The Month We Lost. Black May was not a tactical defeat, he wrote. It was a mathematical inevitability. I had believed superior tactics could overcome superior resources. I was wrong. In industrial warfare, production capacity is destiny. We fought bravely. We innovated desperately, but we were buried under an avalanche of American steel, and no amount of courage can stop an avalanche. It was, perhaps, the most intellectually honest reflection any senior Nazi leader produced. Of the approximately 40,000 men who served in German U-boats during World War II, 30,000 died. A casualty rate of 75%, the highest of any military branch in any nation during the war. Black May claimed nearly 7,000 in a single month. Their graves are scattered across the Atlantic floor, in water too deep for recovery. 50 iron tombs rest in darkness, preserving men frozen in their final moments, some at their stations, hands still gripping controls, others crushed into compartments imploded by pressure. They were not heroes. Many believed Nazi ideology. Their mission was to starve Britain into submission, targeting merchant sailors and cargo ships, unglamorous targets that held food, medicine, and survival supplies for civilians. But they were also men. Young men mostly, average age 21. They endured conditions almost unimaginable. Weeks submerged in fetid air, eating moldy bread, sleeping in shifts in bunks stacked like coffins, breathing diesel fumes and their own stench, knowing that any moment could bring the terrifying cascade of depth charges. Herbert Werner, one of the few veteran commanders to survive, wrote in his memoir, Iron Coffins, "We were pioneers of underwater warfare, soldiers of a weapon that promised invincibility. Instead, we became participants in our own obsolescence. Technology and production buried us while we were still believing in triumph." Black May's statistics focus on U-boat losses, but the merchant sailors deserve remembrance too. Even in the month Germany lost 90 to 9 submarines, Allied merchant ships still sank. 27 vessels went down in May 1943, 264,000 tons. That's over 600 sailors dead, men who drowned in burning oil slicks, frozen lifeboats, or were pulled under when suction from sinking ships dragged them down. They had no weapons, no glory. They were civilians, mostly, contracted to transport cargo across waters they knew held death. Their courage was quiet, showing up, loading cargo, sailing into the dark, and doing it again after watching friends die. Samuel Eliot Morison, the official U.S. naval historian, wrote, "The merchant sailors won the Battle of the Atlantic, not through combat, but through persistence. They kept sailing when every voyage was a coin flip with mortality. They delivered the weapons, the fuel, the food that made victory possible, and they did it for wages, not medals." Over 9,500 Allied merchant sailors died in 1943 alone. Most have no graves but the sea. Black May represents one of history's clearest examples of industrial warfare's mathematics' overwhelming tactical excellence. Germany had superior individual submarines, better trained crews, and innovative tactics. None of it mattered against an enemy who could build faster, innovate quicker, and absorb losses while multiplying countermeasures. The implications extended beyond the Atlantic. The same dynamic played out in every theater. German Tigers were mechanically superior to Sherman tanks, but America built 50,000 Shermans versus Germany's 1,350 Tigers. German Me-262 jets were faster than any Allied fighter, but appeared too late in numbers too small. German synthetic oil production was more efficient, but Allied bombing and Soviet advance destroyed production capacity. Everywhere, German excellence met Allied abundance, and abundance won. The lesson echoes across military history. In sustained conflict between industrialized powers, production capacity trumps tactical innovation. The side that can absorb losses, replace equipment, and maintain pressure through sheer volume of resources will eventually prevail, regardless of battlefield virtuosity. It's a cold lesson. It strips romance from warfare. It suggests that courage, creativity, and skill matter less than factory output and supply chains. But it's true. Today, the Battle of the Atlantic is overshadowed in popular memory by D-Day, Stalingrad, and Hiroshima. But Churchill was right when he said it was the campaign that frightened him most. Had Germany won the Atlantic, there would have been no D-Day. Britain would have starved or sued for peace. The American invasion buildup would have been impossible. Black May was the month that trajectory reversed irreversibly. Historians mark it as the turning point, the moment when Allied victory in the Atlantic became inevitable. Not one, the U-boat threat continued through 1944, and boats were still operational on VE Day. But inevitable, because the mathematics, once inverted, could not be reversed. Germany could not outbuild Allied production. It couldn't replace trained crews faster than they died. It couldn't innovate quickly enough to offset systemic disadvantages. The war would continue for 2 more years. Millions more would die. But the question of who would win had been answered by accountants, welders, and production managers working in shipyards far from any battlefield. The front line was the factory floor, and on that front, the Allies had already won. May 1943, 99 submarines lost. 7,000 men died, 425 boats at the start, 326 at the end. And in the ledger columns of Admiral Dönitz's meticulous handwriting, a conclusion written in numbers more permanent than ideology. Losses exceed replacement capacity. Operations unsustainable. Position untenable. Mathematics doesn't negotiate. It doesn't rally. It doesn't inspire last-minute heroics. It simply tallies addition and subtraction until one column exceeds the other, and the side with the smaller number loses. Black May was the month the Atlantic became an accounting problem, and Germany couldn't balance the books. If this exploration of industrial warfare's cold mathematics resonated with you, if you're fascinated by the untold stories where spreadsheets mattered more than swords, subscribe to this channel. We dive deep into the hidden mechanisms of history. The supply chains that decided battles, the production lines that won wars, the accountants who shaped empires. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And what other forgotten chapters of industrial warfare should we explore? The Pacific submarine campaign, Soviet factory evacuations, the logistical miracle of D-Day? The warriors get the monuments, but the workers won the war. And their story deserves to be told.